I'm Emily, 32 years old, and I've spent my entire life being the daughter my parents forgot to love. Last October, I sent my family the most important invitation of my career. My father's response? He laughed and called me just a lowly teacher. My sister said she was too busy. She had dinner plans. My mother didn't even bother to type a reply. She simply liked my sister's message and moved on. I stared at my phone for a long time that night. Then I typed back 3 words. That's fine. But what they didn't know, what none of them could have predicted, was that 48 hours later, my father would be sitting in a crowded restaurant, scrolling his phone, when his face would turn white as a sheet, because on that screen, in front of millions of viewers, was me. Before I continue, if this story speaks to you, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you genuinely connect with it. Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now let me take you back 3 weeks before that night, to the day a single envelope changed everything. The autumn sun was setting behind Jefferson Middle School when I finished wiping down the last whiteboard. Room 214 had been my second home for 8 years now. The thank you cards from students covered an entire wall, handwritten notes in crayon, marker, and sometimes shaky pencil from kids who'd never written a letter before me. I was collecting my bag when my phone buzzed. Mom. Emily, honey, just wanted to let you know, Victoria won her case today. The big one. You know, the pharmaceutical lawsuit? I smiled genuinely. That's wonderful, Mom. Tell her I said congratulations. We're planning a dinner this weekend to celebrate. Your father is so proud. He's already called everyone. Her voice practically glowed through the speaker. That sounds nice. Oh, and before I forget, there was shuffling on her end. Actually, sweetie, I need to call Vicky back. She's waiting. We'll talk later, okay? Sure, Mom. I actually had something to... The dial tone cut me off. I stared at the phone. The screen faded to black. On my desk sat an unopened envelope. Thick cream paper. Official seal from the U.S. Department of Education. I'd been carrying it in my bag for 2 days, waiting for the right moment to share the news. I picked it up again. Ran my thumb across the embossed letters. National Teacher of the Year Selection Committee. Inside was an invitation that most educators never receive in their entire careers. I was one of 4 finalists in the country. The ceremony would be in Washington, D.C. The Secretary of Education would present the award. C-SPAN would broadcast it live. I looked at the thank you cards on my wall. At least someone thought I mattered. This wasn't the first time I'd been cut off mid-sentence. 3 years ago, at my master's graduation, Dad and Mom arrived 2 hours late. Traffic, they said. But the next morning, I overheard Mom on the phone bragging to Aunt Patricia. We made it just in time for Victoria's Bar Association dinner last night. She looked stunning accepting that award. They'd left my ceremony early. They never told me. 2 years ago, on my 30th birthday, no one called. Not Dad, not Mom, not Victoria. 3 days later, Mom texted, "Oh, honey, was your birthday last week? Time flies. Let's do lunch soon." We never did. Last Christmas, Victoria announced her promotion to senior associate. Dad opened a bottle of his special occasion wine, the one he'd been saving for 15 years. When I mentioned that my students had raised enough money to buy new books for the school library, he nodded absently and asked Victoria about her bonus. I learned to stop expecting, but this letter, this was different. I read it again, slower this time. Dear Ms. Carter, we are honored to inform you that you have been selected as a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year Award. Your nomination was submitted by a distinguished educator whose identity, per tradition, will remain confidential until the ceremony. A distinguished educator. Someone who believed in me enough to put my name forward for the highest honor in American education. My heart beat faster. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe if they saw the official invitation, the government seal, the words Washington, D.C. and Secretary of Education, maybe then they would finally understand. I opened my family group chat and started typing. A week passed. I carried that invitation everywhere, in my bag, on my nightstand, in my heart. I read it so many times the creases started to wear thin. Finally, I decided it was time to tell my family. I rewrote that message 11 times. The first draft was too long. 3 paragraphs explaining what the award meant, how rare it was, how the Secretary of Education would be there. I deleted it. Too desperate. The second was too short. "Hey, I'm up for an award. Want to come?" That felt like I was already apologizing for asking. By draft 11, I'd stripped it down to the essentials. "Hi everyone, I have some news. I've been selected as a finalist for the National Teacher of the Year award. The ceremony is October 15th in Washington, D.C. It would mean a lot to me if you could be there. I've attached the official invitation with all the details. Love, Emily." I attached the PDF, the one with the Department of Education letterhead, the gold seal, the formal language about honoring America's finest educators. My thumb hovered over the send button. For a full minute, I couldn't press it. What if they said no? What if they laughed? What if they didn't respond at all? But what if, just this once, they showed up? I pressed send. Then I waited. I made dinner, checked my phone, graded papers, checked my phone, watched half an episode of something I don't remember, checked my phone. Nothing. By midnight, the message showed read by all 3 of them. No response. I fell asleep with my phone on my pillow, the screen facing up. At 7:42 the next morning, I woke to a notification. My heart jumped. 3 gray dots appeared under Dad's name. He was typing, finally. After all these years, maybe. The dots disappeared, then reappeared. Then a message popped up. Dad's message was 11 words. "Just a lowly teacher's award? I'm not flying to Washington for that nonsense." I read it 3 times. Each time the words cut deeper. Just a lowly teacher. Before I could process, Victoria's response appeared. "Sorry, Em. Mark and I have dinner plans that night. Can't cancel. It's important. You understand, right?" The emoji. She actually added a smiley face. I watched the screen, waiting for Mom to say something, to defend me, to suggest they reschedule dinner, to acknowledge that her daughter had achieved something most teachers only dream about. Instead, a small notification appeared. Diane Carter liked Victoria's message. That was it. No words. No, "Congratulations anyway, honey." No, "We'll celebrate when you get back." Just a thumbs up on my sister's rejection. My chest tightened. The familiar ache settled in. The one I'd carried since I was 12 years old, watching Dad hang Victoria's report card on the fridge while mine went straight into a drawer. I set my phone down, picked it up, set it down again. What do you say to people who make it so clear you don't matter? I typed 4 words. That's fine. No worries. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying about my family years ago. Instead, I felt something harder settle into my chest. A resolve. I would go to Washington alone. I would sit in that audience by myself. And whether I won or lost, I would know that I'd earned my place there. My phone buzzed again. Another message from Victoria. "By the way, you should really think about a career change. Teaching isn't going anywhere, just trying to help." I turned off my phone. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, a 1-bedroom walk-up that Dad once called depressing, and Victoria described as quaint in a sad way. I stared at my master's degree on the wall. Summa cum laude. 3 years of night classes while teaching full-time. Dad had missed that graduation too. My phone rang. I almost ignored it, but the caller ID said, "Grandma Martha." I answered instantly. "Emily, sweetheart?" Her voice was warm, steady, everything my parents' voices weren't. "I heard about the nomination." I paused. "How did you—" "Oh, word travels in education circles." I could hear her smile through the phone. "Did you tell your parents?" The silence was my answer. Ah, she understood. She always did. "Emily, listen to me. Did you read the nomination letter carefully?" Yes. It said the nominator wished to remain anonymous." "Mm-hmm. And it mentioned that this person had nominated 6 teachers over the years?" My breath caught. "How do you know what the letter says?" Grandma Martha had been a principal for 35 years. Before retiring, she'd transformed 3 failing schools into models of excellence. In education circles, her name carried weight I'd never fully understood. "Let's just say I have old friends on the committee." Her voice softened. "Emily, I'll be at the ceremony. I wouldn't miss it for anything." "Grandma, you don't have to fly all the way to—" "I'll be there." Her tone left no room for argument. And Emily, don't worry about your parents. The truth has a way of finding people, sometimes when they least expect it. What do you mean? She paused. Just focus on your speech, sweetheart. I'll see you in Washington. The call ended. I stared at my phone, heart racing. What did she know that I didn't? 2 days before my flight to Washington, Mom called. Emily, we're having Sunday dinner. Your father insists. He wants the whole family together. I have to pack. It's just dinner, sweetheart. Victoria has exciting news to share. Of course she did. I arrived at my parents' house at 6 sharp. The dining room table was set with the good china, the set they only used for special occasions. Candles flickered. Wine breathed in a crystal decanter. Victoria sat at the head of the table, glowing. Emily, she rose to air-kiss my cheek. So glad you could make it. Mark, her husband, offered a polite nod. He'd always been quiet around my family, an observer rather than a participant. Dad raised his glass. Before we eat, I'd like to propose a toast. To Victoria, who just made partner at Mitchell & Associates, the youngest partner in firm history. Partner? I looked at my sister. Congratulations, Victoria. That's impressive. Thank you. She smoothed her silk blouse. It's been a long time coming. Mom beamed. See, Emily? That's what hard work looks like. Real results. Real success. I set down my fork. Victoria, Dad continued, tell Emily what your new salary is. Dad? Victoria laughed. That's tacky. Go on. She should know what ambition can achieve. Victoria shrugged. Let's just say it's substantial. 7 figures, Dad announced proudly. My daughter, 7 figures. The table fell silent. Everyone looked at me. That's wonderful, I said quietly. Dad leaned forward. So, Emily, what's new with you? Still teaching those, what are they? 8th graders? 7th and 8th. He nodded slowly. Right, and that little ceremony you mentioned. When is that again? Tuesday. Ah, he picked up his wine. Teacher appreciation thing? It's the national teacher of the… Right, he waved his hand. Cute. Victoria tilted her head, that familiar condescending smile playing on her lips. So, M, what exactly does a teacher make these days, if you don't mind me asking? I knew where this was going. Around 52,000? A year? Victoria glanced at Mark, suppressing a laugh. Honey, that's less than my monthly bonus. Mark shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Dad nodded gravely. You see, Emily? This is exactly what I've been saying. Teaching has no future, no growth potential. You're smart. You could have done anything. I did do something. My voice stayed level. I chose to teach. But why? Mom leaned forward, genuinely confused. You could have been a lawyer like Victoria, or gone into business like your father. Instead, you're stuck in some classroom with other people's children. I love my students. Love doesn't pay the bills, Dad said. My bills are paid. Barely. Victoria sipped her wine. I mean, that apartment you live in? No offense, but it's kind of… Kind of what? She shrugged. Sad. It's sad, Emily. I set my napkin down, slowly, deliberately. I'm sorry my life doesn't meet your standards. We're just worried about you. Mom's voice took on that wounded tone she used like a weapon. As your family, we… Good at being underpaid, maybe. Victoria muttered it under her breath, but I heard every word. Then something unexpected happened. Mark cleared his throat. He leaned toward me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I think what you do matters. My 3rd grade teacher changed my life. Our eyes met. He nodded once, then looked away. I filed that moment away, the first hint of an ally in enemy territory. Dessert arrived. I hadn't touched my main course. I should go. I stood, reaching for my purse. Early flight tomorrow. Already? Mom frowned. But we haven't even talked about Victoria's promotion party. It's next month. We're renting out the Bellevue. I'll check my calendar, Victoria smirked. Let me guess. Flying economy to your little ceremony? Teacher salary and all. I paused at the doorway, turned back. Actually, the Department of Education covers all travel expenses. I kept my voice calm, almost pleasant. First class. The table went quiet. Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The Department of Education? For a teacher award? It's a national award, Dad. I held his gaze. Broadcast live on C-SPAN. The Secretary of Education presents it personally. But you wouldn't know that. Why wouldn't I know that? Because you didn't read the invitation I sent you. No one spoke. Victoria's smirk faltered. Anyway, I pulled on my coat. Congratulations again, Victoria. Enjoy your party. I drove home in silence. No radio, no podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and my own thoughts. At a red light, my phone buzzed. An email notification. Ms. Carter, this is Sarah Mitchell from CNN Education Desk. We would like to request a brief interview before Tuesday's ceremony. Your nomination has generated significant interest. Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience. CNN. I read it twice, 3 times. My family thought I was going to some little ceremony. A pat on the back, a participation trophy. They had no idea. And for the first time, I realized I didn't want to tell them. Let them find out on their own. Some truths are better discovered than delivered. Monday morning. My suitcase sat by the door. One modest bag, carefully packed, professional dress, comfortable shoes, the speech I'd rewritten 40 times. Dr. James Walker, my principal, called just as I was locking up. Emily, I wanted to catch you before you left. His voice carried a warmth I'd come to rely on over the years. The entire school is rooting for you. We're planning a watch party in the cafeteria. Dr. Walker, you don't have to. Are you kidding? Jefferson Middle School has never had a National Teacher of the Year finalist. This is historic. He paused. Emily, do you know who nominated you? The letter said they wished to remain anonymous. Well, I've been in education for 30 years, and I hear things. His voice dropped slightly. The person who put your name forward, she's a legend in our field. She's only nominated 6 teachers in her entire career. My pulse quickened. 6? All 6 won. I gripped my phone tighter. Who is she? I can't say for certain, but Emily, she was a principal for 35 years. Transformed 3 failing schools. The Secretary of Education calls her personally for advice. He let that sink in. Whoever nominated you didn't do it lightly. They saw something extraordinary. Dr. Walker? Go to Washington. Hold your head high. And Emily? His voice softened. Your family may not understand what you've built, but we do. Your students do. And that matters. I hung up, my mind racing. A woman, a legendary educator, 35 years as a principal. It couldn't be. My phone buzzed. A text from Grandma Martha. Safe travels, sweetheart. Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I have a few old friends who are very eager to meet you. Old friends? What was she planning? The flight to Reagan National was surreal. First class meant champagne before takeoff, seats that reclined fully, a flight attendant who called me Ms. Carter like I was someone important. I wasn't used to being treated like I mattered. A black car waited at arrivals. The driver held a sign with my name. He took my bag, opened my door, and drove me to the Willard Intercontinental, a hotel I'd only ever seen in movies about presidents and power brokers. The lobby gleamed with crystal chandeliers, marble floors, staff in crisp uniforms who greeted me by name. Miss Carter, welcome. Your suite is ready. If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate. Suite, not room, suite. I met the other 3 finalists at the reception that evening. Michael Torres from New Mexico, a science teacher who'd built a robotics program in an underfunded district. Priya Sharma from Michigan, an ESL teacher helping immigrant children find their voice. David Okonkwo from Georgia, a special education teacher who'd developed new techniques for nonverbal students. We were all nervous, all humbled, all slightly overwhelmed. Can you believe this? Priya whispered, gesturing at the room full of education officials and policymakers. Yesterday I was grading spelling tests. Michael nodded. My principal had to convince me the nomination letter wasn't a scam. We laughed. The relieved laughter of people who'd spent their careers being underestimated. Then someone handed me a program for tomorrow's ceremony. I scanned the list of attendees, committee members, education secretaries from 12 states, university presidents. Then I saw it. Guest of honor, Martha Reynolds. Not guest, not attendee, guest of honor. My grandmother wasn't just coming to support me, she was being honored herself. What had she done? What was happening tomorrow? I found her in the hotel lobby the next morning. Grandma Martha sat in a wingback chair by the window, morning light catching the silver in her hair. At 84, she still carried herself like the principal she'd been. Straight-backed, sharp-eyed, commanding respect without demanding it. She rose when she saw me. Her embrace was fierce. "My girl," she whispered. "My brilliant, beautiful girl." "Grandma." I pulled back, searching her face. "What's going on? Why are you the guest of honor?" She smiled, the smile of someone holding a wonderful secret. "Sit with me, Emily." We settled into adjacent chairs. She took my hands in hers. "I've been watching your career since the day you stepped into your first classroom." Her eyes glistened. "Every student you saved, every parent who told me how you stayed late to help their child, every colleague who said you made them want to be a better teacher. You collected stories about me?" "I collected evidence." She squeezed my hands. "Emily, 6 years ago, I wanted to nominate you. But you weren't ready. You hadn't found your voice yet. So I waited." My throat tightened. The nomination letter said, 6 teachers, 30 years, all 6 won. She nodded. "I don't submit names lightly. When I recommend someone, the committee listens, because they know I've done my homework." "Grandma?" "There's more." She leaned closer. "Tonight, during the ceremony, a former student will speak about each finalist. I arranged for one of yours to be here, someone whose life you changed." "Who?" "You'll see." Her eyes sparkled. "And Emily, don't worry about your parents. They'll see the broadcast. The whole country will. And when they do, they'll finally understand what they've been too blind to notice." She kissed my forehead. "Now go practice your speech. You're going to need it." While I was preparing in Washington, 300 miles away in Philadelphia, my sister was having lunch. I didn't know this at the time. I learned about it later, from screenshots that would eventually make their way across social media, shared by people who'd been at that table. Victoria had chosen Tallulah's table, an exclusive spot where reservations were booked a year in advance. Her companions were 3 fellow lawyers from rival firms, women she networked with, competed against, and occasionally befriended. One of them, Megan Cross, glanced up from her salad. "Hey, isn't your sister a teacher? I saw something online about a national award ceremony today." Victoria waved dismissively. "Oh, that? It's just some teacher appreciation thing. You know how those are. Everyone gets a trophy." "But National Teacher of the Year?" Another woman, Joanna Price, looked skeptical. "That sounds pretty significant." "Please," Victoria laughed. "It's not like she's winning a Nobel Prize. It's just teaching." Megan and Joanna exchanged glances. "Teaching is actually really hard," Megan said carefully. "My son's 3rd-grade teacher basically saved his life." Victoria sipped her wine. "I'm sure Emily's fine at what she does, but let's be honest. If she had real ambition, she wouldn't have settled for a $50,000 salary and a classroom full of other people's children." The table went quiet. What Victoria didn't know, what no one at that table told her, was that Joanna Price wasn't just a lawyer. Before pivoting to law, she'd spent 5 years as an education reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer. She still had contacts there, and she had her phone out, typing notes about the conversation. Some people dig their own graves with their words. They just don't realize it until the dirt starts falling. That evening, October 15th, 6:47 p.m. Eastern Time, the Carter family arrived at Parc Brasserie, a French restaurant on Rittenhouse Square. Victoria had reserved the best table, window view, white tablecloth, a bottle of Dom Perignon chilling in a silver bucket. "To Victoria," Dad raised his glass. "Partner at 36. I couldn't be prouder." "To Victoria," Mom echoed, her diamond earrings catching the candlelight. They clinked glasses, laughed, ordered appetizers that cost more than I made in a day. "This is how you celebrate real achievements," Dad said, leaning back in his chair. Not some certificate ceremony in a high school gym. Victoria smiled. Speaking of which, isn't Emily's little thing happening right now? Mom checked her watch. I suppose. She said it started at 7. Wonder how many people are there? Victoria snickered. 20? 30? Probably some conference room, Dad agreed. Finger sandwiches and a PowerPoint presentation. Mark, Victoria's husband, stayed quiet. He stared at his plate, jaw tight, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation. When Victoria mocked Emily's little thing, he opened his mouth as if to speak, then caught Victoria's sharp glance and looked away. You know, Mom said, I do feel a little bad. Maybe we should have sent flowers or something. For what? Victoria scoffed. She's a teacher, Mom. They hand out these awards constantly. Most improved attendance. Best bulletin board. It's meaningless. Still, she's my daughter. And she chose her path. Dad's voice hardened. We've offered her opportunities. She rejected every one. If she wants to waste her potential playing kindergarten, that's her choice. Mark cleared his throat. Actually, I think it's 7th and 8th grade. And the nomination did say National Teacher of... Mark, Victoria shot him a look. Not now. He fell silent. Across the country, in Washington, D.C., the lights in the grand ballroom were dimming. 2,000 people took their seats, cameras prepared to roll, and I stepped into position behind the curtain, heart pounding. Okay, I need to pause here for a second. Right now, my family is sitting in that fancy restaurant completely clueless, laughing at my little ceremony, and I'm standing backstage in Washington, D.C., about to walk out in front of millions of people. What do you think happens next? Drop your prediction in the comments. And if you're Team Emily right now, hit that like button. Let's see how many of us have been in her shoes. Now, back to that night. The grand ballroom of the Kennedy Center took my breath away. 2,000 people. Crystal chandeliers casting golden light across a sea of round tables draped in white. American flags flanking a stage that seemed to stretch forever. And cameras, so many cameras positioned at every angle. A production assistant touched my elbow. Ms. Carter, you'll enter from stage left when they call your name. Just follow the spotlight. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Through a gap in the curtain, I spotted Grandma Martha in the front row, seated directly behind a placard that read, Guest of Honor. She wore her best navy suit, the pearl earrings Grandpa had given her 50 years ago. Her eyes were already glistening. The Secretary of Education approached the podium. Cameras swung toward him. Good evening. We are here tonight to honor America's finest educators. I felt my phone buzz in my clutch. A text from Grandma. I'm so proud of you. Your parents will soon see what I've always known. The whole country is about to meet the Emily I love. The whole country. C-SPAN was broadcasting live. CNN had a camera crew. Education journalists from every major outlet were taking notes. And in Philadelphia, my family was eating French cuisine, mocking what they assumed was a little ceremony. Representing the best of what education can be, the secretary continued. Teachers who go beyond the curriculum, who see potential where others see problems, who change lives, one student at a time. I closed my eyes, breathed. Whatever happened next, I had earned my place here. Not because of my family's approval, not because of money or status or prestige, because I showed up. Every day. For 12 years. For kids who had no one else. My name was called. I stepped into the light. Before we announce our final results, the secretary said, each finalist will hear from a former student whose life they touched. Please welcome Marcus Thompson. My heart stopped. Marcus. Little Marcus Thompson, who used to sit in the back of my classroom with holes in his shoes and hunger in his eyes, who turned in assignments written on napkins because he couldn't afford notebooks, who once told me he'd probably be dead by 20. But the man walking toward the microphone wasn't little anymore. Marcus Thompson stood 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered in a perfectly tailored suit. A Johns Hopkins ID badge hung from his pocket. At 28, he was a second-year resident in pediatric surgery. When I was 16, Marcus began, his voice steady, I was homeless. The audience fell silent. My mom was in prison. I was sleeping in my car. I'd given up on everything. School, life, myself. Then I walked into Miss Carter's English class. He paused, looked directly at me. She noticed things. That I was always hungry. That I wore the same clothes every day. That I flinched when people moved too fast. His voice cracked slightly. She never announced it. She never made me feel like a charity case. She just helped. I felt tears building. She bought me food, drove me to scholarship interviews, stayed after school for hours helping me with my college applications. When I got into Johns Hopkins, Ms. Carter was the first person I called. Not because she was my teacher, because she was the first adult who ever believed I could be something. Marcus wiped his eyes. Miss Carter didn't save my life with big gestures. She saved it with small acts of kindness, every single day. I'm a doctor today because of her. The audience rose to their feet. 2,000 people, standing, applauding. For me. The applause faded. The Secretary of Education returned to the podium with a cream envelope in his hands. The selection committee has reviewed hundreds of nominations from across the nation. The 4 finalists you've seen tonight represent the absolute best of American education. He paused. But only one can receive our highest honor. I couldn't breathe. Beside me, Priya Sharma gripped my hand. Michael Torres closed his eyes. David Okonkwo whispered what sounded like a prayer. The secretary broke the seal. The 2024 National Teacher of the Year is... Silence. 2,000 people holding their breath. Emily Carter, from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The room exploded. I didn't move, couldn't move. Priya had to physically push me forward. Go, she laughed through tears. Go! The walk to that stage felt like a dream. Lights blurring, applause thundering, faces smiling, 2,000 strangers on their feet, celebrating a teacher from an underfunded middle school who'd simply refused to give up on her kids. The secretary shook my hand. Cameras flashed. In the crowd, I spotted Marcus. He was crying openly now, clapping so hard his hands must have hurt. Our eyes met. He mouthed 2 words. Thank you. No. Thank you, Marcus, for becoming proof that what I do matters. Someone handed me a crystal trophy so beautiful I was afraid to hold it. Congratulations, Miss Carter. The secretary leaned close. Your grandmother is a force of nature. She's been telling everyone you'd win for months. I looked out at the audience, found Grandma Martha in the front row. She was sobbing, openly, joyfully, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. I had never seen her cry before. At the bottom of the screen, a CNN chyron appeared. Breaking. Philadelphia teacher Emily Carter, named National Teacher of the Year, nominated by legendary educator Martha Reynolds. Millions of Americans saw that headline, including, though I didn't know it yet, 3 people in a French restaurant who had just ordered dessert. Philadelphia. 7:52 p.m. Richard Carter wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and reached for his phone. A habit, checking stocks, scrolling news, staying connected to the world that mattered. A CNN notification sat at the top of his screen. Breaking. Philadelphia teacher wins prestigious national award. He almost scrolled past it. Philadelphia had thousands of teachers. What were the odds? Then he saw the photo. His hand froze. The image showed a woman on stage, shaking hands with a man in a dark suit. Behind them, an enormous screen displayed the words, National Teacher of the Year, 2024. The woman was his daughter. Richard? Diane noticed his expression. What is it? Bad news from the market? He couldn't speak. He held out the phone with a trembling hand. Diane took it, squinted at the screen. Her face went pale. That's Emily. What? Victoria grabbed the phone. Her wineglass tipped. Red liquid spread across the white tablecloth. No, that can't be. She said it was just a small ceremony. The Secretary of Education, Dad whispered. She's shaking hands with the Secretary of Education. Mark leaned over to look. His expression was unreadable. CNN, he said quietly. That's CNN's camera. This is being broadcast nationally. Victoria scrolled frantically. More photos. Emily at the podium. Emily receiving a crystal trophy. Emily surrounded by applauding dignitaries. And then the video. A young black man at a microphone, tears streaming down his face. Ms. Carter didn't save my life with big gestures, she saved it with small acts of kindness, every single day. Oh my God. Victoria's voice was barely audible. This is actually a big deal. The restaurant continued around them. Waiters moved, diners laughed, music played. The Carter family sat frozen in the middle of it all. Back in Washington, I stood at the podium, clutching my trophy, looking out at 2,000 faces waiting for me to speak. The teleprompter was ready. I'd written a safe speech, statistics about education funding, platitudes about the importance of teachers. I ignored it. Growing up, I began, my voice surprisingly steady. I was told that teaching was not a real career. The audience shifted. This wasn't the expected gratitude speech. I was told I was wasting my potential, that I would never amount to anything, that success meant money and teachers... I paused. Teachers were just people who couldn't make it anywhere else. Silence. But tonight, I stand here because of one person who never stopped believing in me. I found Grandma Martha's eyes in the crowd. My grandmother, Martha Reynolds. The camera swung to her. She pressed a hand to her heart. Grandma, you taught me something my parents never could. That success isn't measured by salary or status. It's measured by the lives you touch, the students you lift up, the seeds you plant that bloom long after you're gone. I thought of Marcus, of the hundreds of students who'd passed through my classroom, of the thank you cards covering my walls. To every teacher watching tonight, your work matters, your sacrifice matters. Your students will remember you long after they forget what you taught them. They'll remember how you made them feel. I looked directly into the main camera. And to anyone who's ever been told they weren't enough, you are. Your worth isn't determined by the people who refuse to see it. Find the people who do. Hold on to them, and never, ever apologize for following your heart. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. I never mentioned my parents by name. I didn't have to. Everyone watching knew who wasn't there. The phone started ringing before the applause ended. In the Philadelphia restaurant, Richard's screen lit up with call after call. Frank Morrison, his golf buddy. Richard, just saw your daughter on CNN. Why aren't you there? He let it go to voicemail. Another call, his brother Tom. Hey, Emily's all over the news. You must be so proud. Where are you guys watching from? Voicemail. Diane's phone buzzed. Their neighbor, Helen, their pastor, her book club friends, all asking the same question. Why aren't you with Emily? Victoria's phone was worst of all. Text messages flooded in from colleagues, law school friends, distant acquaintances she barely remembered. Saw your sister on TV, so cool. Why weren't you at the ceremony? Everything okay? Just watched the speech. She mentioned someone who believed in her. That's you, right? Victoria stared at that last message. The lie would be so easy. Yes, of course. I'm her biggest supporter. But people had seen the broadcast. They'd heard Emily thank her grandmother, and only her grandmother. A woman approached their table. Gray hair, kind face, a napkin clutched in her hand. Excuse me, I couldn't help but notice. Are you Emily Carter's family? She pointed at the phone still clutched in Diane's hand. I just saw her win on TV. You must be so proud. Richard attempted a smile. Yes, very proud. The woman's face shifted. Wait, why aren't you at the ceremony? Washington's not that far. Diane fumbled. There weren't any flights. Flights? The woman frowned. It's a 3-hour drive. The table fell silent. The woman's expression changed. Understanding, judgment, pity. Oh, she said quietly. I see. She walked away without another word. The Carter family sat in their expensive restaurant, surrounded by witnesses to their absence. Victoria excused herself to the restroom. She needed to control this. Contain it. Spin it. Her fingers flew across her phone screen. So proud of my amazing little sister Emily. Wish we could have been there tonight. Family always comes first. Hashtag National Teacher of the Year. Hashtag Proud Sister. She added a photo of Emily from the broadcast. Screenshot, crop, filter, posted. Within seconds, the comments began. Congratulations to your sister. Teachers are heroes. So sweet that you're supporting her. Victoria exhaled. Crisis managed. Then a new comment appeared. Joanna Price, the lawyer from lunch. The one Victoria had forgotten was once a journalist. Funny, at lunch today you called it just a teacher appreciation thing and said teaching wasn't a real career. What changed? Victoria's blood ran cold. More comments flooded in. Wait, what? Joanna, receipts please? Yikes. This is awkward. Joanna replied with her own words. Not a screenshot, but a direct quote of what Victoria had said at lunch. At lunch today, Victoria called her sister's national award just a teacher appreciation thing and said Emily's career wasn't going anywhere. I was there. I heard it. 3 other women from that lunch liked Joanna's comment. One added, "Can confirm. It was uncomfortable to witness." The post exploded. Victoria deleted it. But screenshots had already been taken. Someone had already shared it to Twitter. Someone else was creating a TikTok. Her phone buzzed. A text from a senior partner. Victoria, heads up. Some clients are asking about the social media situation with your sister. The education nonprofit we represent saw the posts. Might want to get ahead of this. Victoria's stomach dropped. The education nonprofit. The firm's biggest pro bono client. The case she'd been assigned to lead. She typed back, handling it now. But how do you handle a truth that's already out there? Victoria's hands shook. She tried calling Emily. Voicemail. Tried again. Voicemail. A text from Mark. Maybe you should come back to the table. People are staring. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. Perfect hair, perfect makeup, perfect lawyer who had everything. Everything except her sister's respect. And now, possibly, everyone else's too. My hotel room was quiet. The ceremony had ended hours ago. The champagne reception, the photographs, the endless handshakes, all of it blurring together in a golden haze. Now it was nearly midnight, and I sat on the edge of my bed, trophy on the nightstand, phone face down on the comforter. I knew they were trying to reach me. 47 missed calls from Dad, 23 from Mom, 15 from Victoria. I hadn't opened a single voicemail. I didn't want to hear their excuses, their explanations, their sudden pride now that the whole world was watching. A soft knock on my door. Grandma Martha stood in the hallway, wrapped in a hotel robe, her eyes still red from crying. "May I come in?" I stepped aside. She settled into the armchair by the window. For a long moment, we just sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the Washington Monument glowing against the night sky. "Do you want to talk to them?" she finally asked. I shook my head. "Not tonight." "That's your right." I turned to look at her. "Did you know this would happen? That they'd see it?" She smiled softly. "I knew the broadcast would reach them. What they chose to do with that information was always up to them." Her eyes met mine. "Emily, I didn't arrange tonight to punish your parents. I arranged it to honor you. What they're feeling right now, that's a consequence of their own choices." I felt tears threatening. "I just wanted them to show up. Once." "I know, sweetheart." She reached for my hand. "But some people can only see value when the world points it out to them. That's their limitation, not yours." I leaned into her shoulder. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone else's validation. I already had mine. 1 week after Washington, the fallout continued. Richard Carter walked into his regular Tuesday golf game at Marion Golf Club. 4 men he'd known for 30 years, colleagues, friends, men who respected him. "Richard," Frank Morrison called out, "how's our celebrity father doing?" The others laughed, not with Richard, at him. "I heard you missed the ceremony because you were too busy." Tom Hartley adjusted his glove. "Busy doing what? Eating French food?" Richard's face reddened. "That's not. We had a prior commitment. To celebrate your other daughter." Jim Patterson shook his head. "Meanwhile, Emily's shaking hands with cabinet members on national television. Hell of a prior commitment, Rich." Diane fared no better. At her book club that Thursday, the women who normally discussed Oprah's latest pick spent the first 20 minutes discussing Emily's speech instead. "That line about finding people who believe in you," said Margaret Sullivan. "So beautiful. Were you there when she said it?" Diane stirred her tea. "We watched from home." "From home?" Patricia Wells raised an eyebrow. But it was in Washington. That's only a few hours away. We couldn't get flights. Flights? Helen Moore laughed. Diane, you can drive there. Richard drives to New York for golf tournaments. The women exchanged glances, the kind that communicated volumes without words. Diane set down her teacup and left early. But the worst was reserved for Victoria. The screenshots had spread. Legal Twitter had opinions. A local newspaper ran a small piece. Lawyers' lunch comments about teacher sister go viral. The following Monday, Victoria was quietly removed from the education nonprofit case. It's not punishment, her supervising partner said. It's optics. The client specifically requested a different attorney. No one mentioned the social media posts directly. They didn't have to. Victoria's path to equity partner wasn't blocked. But she'd learned something important. Reputation isn't just about winning cases. It's about who people believe you are when no one's watching. Actions have consequences. Sometimes they just take a week to arrive. Quick pause. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had a moment where your family finally had to face the consequences of how they treated you? I know I'm not alone in this. Comment below with your story. I read every single one, and if you're still here, thank you. We're almost at the end, and trust me, it gets better. Hit subscribe if you haven't already. Now, let's continue. 2 weeks after Washington, I agreed to dinner at my parents' house. Not because I wanted to, because I was ready. The house looked the same colonial brick, same manicured lawn, same wreath on the door that Mom changed with the seasons. But when I walked through that front door, everything felt different. My family was already seated in the living room, Dad in his armchair, Mom on the sofa. Victoria perched on the edge of a cushion like she might need to flee at any moment. No one stood to greet me. Emily? Dad cleared his throat. We need to talk about what happened. I remained standing. What happened? I won an award. You didn't come. That's what happened. It's more complicated than that, is it? I kept my voice level. Because from where I'm standing, it's pretty simple. I invited you to the most important night of my career. You laughed at me and went to dinner instead. Mom twisted her hands. We didn't know it was such a big deal. I sent you the invitation. It said, National. It said, Secretary of Education. It said, C-SPAN broadcast. I looked at each of them in turn. Which part wasn't clear? Victoria stood abruptly. Fine. You want an apology? I'm sorry we didn't come to your ceremony. Happy now? No, Victoria, I don't want an apology. Then what do you want? I took a breath, steadied myself. I want you to understand something. For 32 years, I've tried to earn your respect, tried to make you proud, tried to prove that my choices were valid, even if they weren't the choices you would have made. I paused. I'm done trying. The room went silent. My hands trembled slightly. I clasped them together to hide it. 32 years of wanting their approval didn't disappear overnight. Part of me still wanted Dad to stand up and say he was proud. Part of me still wanted Mom to hug me and mean it. But I had learned something in Washington. Wanting something doesn't mean you need it to survive. What does that mean? Dad's voice was sharp. It means things are going to change. Dad leaned forward. Emily, you're overreacting. We made a mistake. People make mistakes. A mistake is forgetting a birthday. What you did was deliberate. Deliberate? He scoffed. We didn't deliberately. You read my invitation. My voice didn't waver. You saw exactly what it was. And you decided, consciously, that dinner with Victoria was more important. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Mom's eyes welled up. Emily, please. You're hurting us. I'm hurting you? I almost laughed. Mom, you liked Victoria's rejection. You didn't say a word in my defense. You never do. I didn't mean it that way. Then how did you mean it? She had no answer. Victoria crossed her arms. You're being incredibly dramatic about all this. One missed event and suddenly we're the villains? One event? I turned to face her fully. This isn't about one event, Victoria. This is about 32 years of being second, of being dismissed, of every achievement being minimized while yours were celebrated. That's not true. You called my career lowly. You told your friends my award was meaningless. You posted a fake congratulations on social media while screenshots of your real words were going viral. I shook my head. You couldn't even be honest about how little you think of me. Victoria's face flushed. For once, she had nothing to say. Dad stood, trying to reclaim control. Enough. This is family business. We'll work it out privately, like adults. No. The word came out calm, certain. We won't work it out by pretending nothing happened. That's what we've always done. That's how we got here. Then what do you suggest? I looked at my father, the man who'd spent my entire life measuring my worth in dollars. I suggest you start listening. I gathered my coat and purse. Where are you going? Mom's voice pitched higher. We're not finished. Yes, we are. I turned at the doorway. I'm not cutting you out of my life, but I'm done being the family afterthought, the one who shows up no matter how she's treated, the one who apologizes for taking up space. Emily, Dad started. Let me finish. My voice carried a strength I didn't know I had. From now on, I will attend family events when I'm treated with respect. I will answer calls when I feel like talking. I will visit when I'm welcome, actually welcome, not just tolerated. Victoria rolled her eyes. So you're giving us rules now? I'm giving myself boundaries. There's a difference. This is ridiculous. Dad's face reddened. We're your parents. You can't just— I can, and I am. I met his eyes. You spent 32 years teaching me that my worth depended on your approval. It took me too long to learn you were wrong. Mom was crying now, real tears, streaming down her face. Part of me wanted to comfort her, old habits. But another part, the part that had stood on that stage in Washington, that had heard Marcus describe how I'd changed his life, that had finally understood my own value, that part held firm. If you want to be part of my life, you need to see me, really see me. Not the daughter you wished I was, not the teacher you're embarrassed by, me. I opened the front door. Cool autumn air rushed in. I hope you can do that, I said quietly. But if you can't, I'll survive. I've built a good life, a meaningful life, with or without your blessing. I stepped outside. The door closed softly behind me. I didn't look back. 6 months later. Spring sunlight streamed through the windows of my new apartment, a 2-bedroom in a brownstone, twice the size of my old place. The award had come with prize money I hadn't expected, enough for a down payment on a real home. I stood in my kitchen preparing lesson plans, coffee steaming beside me. On the wall hung a framed photo from Washington. Grandma Martha and me, arms around each other, both of us crying and laughing at the same time. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Ms. Carter, I matched. Pediatric surgery at Stanford. I nearly dropped my coffee. Marcus, that's incredible. I couldn't have done it without you. I wanted you to know before I posted anywhere. After we hung up, I sat with that feeling. Pride, purpose, the kind of satisfaction no salary could buy. My calendar showed a speaking engagement next week, a keynote at the National Education Association conference. 3,000 teachers from across the country coming to hear me talk about finding meaning in work that matters. The school had thrown me a party when I returned from Washington. Students made signs. Parents brought food. Dr. Walker presented me with a plaque that now hung in room 214. In April, I was invited to the White House. The president himself shook my hand in the Rose Garden, a tradition for National Teachers of the Year. Thank you for what you do, he said. I thought about my father, who once called my career lowly. I wondered if he was watching. Me, Emily Carter from Philadelphia, shaking hands with the First Lady of the United States. My family still called sometimes. Mom more than Dad, Victoria rarely. I answered when I felt like it. That was the difference. I no longer waited by the phone, hoping for their approval. I no longer adjusted my life around their opinions. I had found my people, my purpose, my peace. That was enough. That was everything. On my desk sat a letter from the Department of Education. They wanted to film a short documentary about Grandma Martha and me, 2 generations of educators, the legacy we'd built. Beside it was a small envelope, cream-colored, no return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Dad's. I opened it slowly. Emily, I was wrong. About your career. About what matters. About you. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know. I'm sorry, Dad. I read it twice, set it down gently. 6 months ago, this letter would have meant everything. I would have called immediately, rushed over, rebuilt bridges that were never really there. Now I felt something different. Not anger, not vindication. Peace. I would respond, eventually, when I was ready, on my terms. Outside my window, spring was awakening. Cherry blossoms, fresh starts, the cycle of renewal that teachers understand better than anyone. Every September a new beginning, every class a chance to change lives. I thought about that night in the restaurant. Dad's face going white. The phone calls flooding in. The moment they finally saw what I'd been all along. But here's what I learned. I didn't need that moment for myself. I already knew my worth. Sometimes the people we love most are the last to see us clearly. Sometimes they never do. And that has to be okay. My grandmother once told me that the best teachers don't teach subjects. They teach students. They see potential where others see problems. They plant seeds that bloom long after they're gone. I understood now. She'd been teaching me all along. Not just how to be an educator, how to be myself. And that, in the end, was the only lesson that mattered. Looking back, here's what this journey taught me. First, your worth is not determined by the people who refuse to see it. Find those who do and hold them close. Second, walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the strongest thing you can do. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges to healthier relationships. And third, the best revenge isn't dramatic. It's living well, authentically, and on your own terms. If my story resonated with you, I'd love to hear yours. Drop a comment below and share a moment when you finally chose yourself over someone else's expectations. And if you want more stories like this, there's a video in the description I think you'll love. Thank you for staying until the end. See you in the next one.